found the #1 internet site for irreverent, cool, and entertaining talk programming. It's LA Talk Radio. We say what we want.
Now, broadcasting
from the City of Angels, Los Angeles.
You're listening to The Sheena Metal Experience with your host, Sheena Metal, only on LA Talk Radio.
That's right. It's the Sheena Metal Experience right here in LA Talk Radio. For more info on the show, latalkradio.com, SheenaMetalExperience.com. Don't forget to email me and let me know what you think of the show. My guest, all the show is wonderful and great to be here with me every week for the last, 4 or 5 weeks now. I have featured one of the amazing cast members from the fantastic Queer as Folk and the Rise and Shine convention, of course, happening in June. I will be there moderating. And you, Scarecrow, I've known the longest. Before I knew everyone from Queer as Folk, I only knew this wonderful actor. The amazing Scott Lowell joins me. Scott, it's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Sheena. It's always nice to come in to see you.
Thanks for being here. It's always so nice to have you here.
I like that you have Queer as Folk Friday. Folk Friday, I guess.
I have Queer as Folk Friday now.
It's Folk Day.
Yeah, except when Gail was here, it was Queer as Folk Thursday.
Well,
that was just because he had auditions and that was the day that he could do.
Yes, as Gail, has his own schedule. It's kind of like goes back to the Mayan calendar. I think.
Is that what it is? He's on like a different.
Yeah, you have to kind of.
He uses the Galen calendar.
Exactly, the Gaelic calendar.
Right, exactly.
Is
we had a blast though. He brought a thumb drive full of tunes and.
Oh, great! Did you?
We sat and played music and talked about music and how we discovered music and.
Oh, how fun!
Relived our childhoods through the 80s and the 70s and play a little Thin Lizzy and some Metallica.
Oh, good.
It was a blast.
You guys went heavy. You
we
were
just
living
hung
up to your name.
We just hung out and did music stuff. Yeah, that was pretty fun.
You were truly metal.
That's kind of, I think, the fun thing for me. I think that because of the internet, I know you and I have talked about this, all the 10 top questions and the 20 top questions,
yes.
Everybody who's ever on a TV show has been asked 100 times.
Right.
So I like people to kind of feel free to come in here and either talk about things they wouldn't normally talk about or do things that are fun for them. Or so next time Gail's going to bring a turntable and we're just going to have we'll spin some vinyl. And
oh my goodness.
That's the fun and
that's
the nice freedom that I have here. What I love about where I work is that I don't have to ask them those 10 questions.
Right.
Because haven't you answered those questions 100 times?
Yeah, a lot of them have been answered already, and I always have a problem with any top lists anyway. I've always kind of said that because I feel like it changes for me all the time.
Right.
And there's so many wonderful things out there to pick like one book or one record or one film that's your favorite I always find that really hard. It kind of makes me sweat inside a little bit.
Right. It's the pressure.
It's
right.
pressure.
It's like trying to push a basketball through a straw.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's like, no, I can't get it all through.
Exactly. There's just too much.
So, but since we're talking about music, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Is that a part at all of your artistic past? Did you sing? Have you done musicals?
I did. Yeah, I was. It will be no wonder that I ended up doing a gay TV show. But I, in high school, was a big drama queen and did all the musicals and all that stuff. And I was president of the concert choir.
Awesome.
That funded all the musicals. I tell this story often that we did a production of Grease in my junior year, and I was treasurer of the concert choir that year. And I somehow managed. I played Teen Angel, who has just one song in the whole show, And I managed to spend almost the entire budget just on my number. We cut a hole out in the ceiling of the stage. I rented a fog machine. I had this ladder.
You were a drama
built that
queen.
came down. I really was. I had kind of this.
You did it the Broadway way.
I would dream it. Yeah, like I would go to sleep at night and I would have these dreams, and I pictured it all. Like this is how it's going to go. And and I spent almost at least half the budget on my one song.
Wow.
Yes.
Did you get kicked out for that?
No, they loved me for it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes. Oh.
It was rewarded there.
Yes. The newspaper, I went to a prep school, and the Hopkins Hilltopper or whatever it was called me Scott Lowell, who has become an icon of Hopkins Theater. descended to the stage in a cloud of smoke. Oh yeah, it was a highlight definitely. So yeah, I did all that stuff, and then I got to college, and my college I went to, Connecticut College, was for some reason kind of anti-musical, and I never did them there, and I never really did. We did like a musical review. We did Three Penny Opera, but that was it. And then I went to the National Theater Institute at the O'Neill, and we didn't really do any musical stuff there. So there went a long, long time. And I think I just kind of lost the muscles for it. And I finally did a musical in Chicago. I did the Chicago premiere of Assassins, which was a great Sondheim musical.
Yeah.
And I played John Wilkes Booth in that. And the director loved me. The musical director hated me and rode me and really made it hard on me. And he kind of scarred me quite a bit to where I'm really self-conscious about singing now because he made me feel like I couldn't do it, even though I did an entire run of this musical and did pretty well. He just kind of every day was on me that this was wrong or this was bad or
right.
And that it just kind of it just made me really self-conscious. So I haven't done one since, but I used to love doing them. It's something I think I would love to do again. And even on Queer as Folk, they wrote in a storyline where Ted became a singing waiter because he loved opera so much, and they only gave me, I think, like a few weeks' notice that this new twist in the storyline was coming up. And I said, well, guys, I'm not actually an opera singer, and I haven't sung in, over 10 years. But I went and I coached and I worked as hard as I could on it, and, got to a point where, we recorded the tracks for me to lip sync to, and everybody agreed that it was pretty good and sounded like a guy who hadn't sung in a while and wasn't a professional opera singer, but I felt like it passed pretty well. But the producers of the show, Ron especially, is such an opera buff that he just couldn't bear that it wasn't like perfect, and so they ended up dubbing some 89-year-old guy singing my stuff. I'm so mad about that.
Wow. That was probably the first time that you ever got aged out by somebody who was 89.
I know.
You just weren't old enough.
You know what? Actually, the only other time that happened I did years ago, one of the first films I ever did back in Chicago was a short film about Beethoven writing the Moonlight Sonata. And I don't play the piano, and so whenever they would have to dub, like cut to my hands playing the piano as I'm playing this thing, they cut to the hands of this professor at this college that we shot it at, and I don't know how old he was, but he had those just really ropey veined kind of hands that look really old, and they looked like the hands again, like of an 89-year-old guy, and so they would cut from my face to like these old crypt keeper hands on the keyboard, and I always laugh at it.
Everything about you has prepared you to be a character actor
think so.
And be 70.
Yes, exactly. I'm waiting for the day.
You're just waiting for that time.
I'm just waiting to be.
I had a guest in here a couple of weeks ago, and she just did a web series that's like kind of a short film with a web series companion, which I love the way New Medium is kind of making all these new things happen. And she plays this child piano prodigy who's now in her 20s and discovers sort of the underground rave club scene in London and thinks about maybe leaving the conservatory. So there are all these scenes where she's playing, but same thing. She tried to learn to play well enough that they could shoot her head.
Right.
But then they had another like classical pianist sort of sit under the piano in her lap and then kind of put her hands up.
That sounds like a fun night.
That's a little crypt keeper, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a little crypt keeper. That sounds like a good Saturday night.
Lost Queers folk scene.
Exactly.
But that's a little strange.
Yes, it's a little.
So there's all these little strange ways that we get to what we have to do with the music.
Absolutely, and all the kind of the fakery that goes on. But yeah, I do miss it. I will say I used to really love doing those things.
There's a magic feeling to musical
theater.
It
is, and when they're good, there's a lot of bad musical theater, and I haven't jumped on board a lot of the kind of more pop stuff that's out now. I guess I'm still old-fashioned in terms of the musicals I like, but like Sunday in the Park with George is one of my favorite plays, let alone musical. The psychology of that show. I mean, still, whenever I watch it or hear a song from it, I'll occasionally burst into tears. It's just wonderful. It just moves me because what it speaks about being an artist and trying to live your life as an artist. But yeah, like I haven't seen one recently that I love. But I'm hopefully one day I'll do them. I feel like I could do like the Barry White musical because I've got right now.
There's something in the air right now.
It's awful.
We've all been inhaling the fires.
I know. I apologize to everyone. I sound like.
Isn't it kind of scary? Because even out my window here at the studio, if you look to the right, it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
if you look to the left, it's fires.
It's fires down there.
Isn't that
It's
strange how
very
you can
smoky.
see how much is in the air?
Yeah,
Plus the Santa Ana winds, I think. We know when you first moved out here, did the Santa Ana winds mess you up every time?
Oh yes, I mean I never had allergies or any of that sort of thing till I moved out here.
I
and
never
now-
did either.
And now periodically I get it, and I discovered I was adopted and have found my birth parents and.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a we
Is
can
that,
talk, we can
oh,
talk about that.
Is that recent that you found your parents?
I found them in '99.
Oh, not recent.
No,
okay.
not recent. It's been a while now, but they, I'm still. My birth father passed away a few years ago, but I'm still talking to my birth mom a lot. But that was one of the things I discovered early on, and she, in terms of the nature versus nurture stuff, the nature side of it is that she has terrible sinus kind of problems, and especially in the spring, gets allergies and things. And I've kind of thought, pshaw, no problem. But yeah, it's really affected me. And so like a day like today, I told you I went out on a run this morning and just huffing in all that lovely East Side LA air has just like left me sounding. I mean, I guess it's kind of sexy, but
right, yeah. Well, it's kind of sexy.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because we have the same sort of. I think part of it is your genetics, but I also think part of it is that when you grow up on the East Coast like we did, we're both Connecticut kids.
Yes.
And then both lived in Illinois for a while.
Yes.
And then luckily for you, you didn't live in Baltimore at all.
No.
But you did play John Wilkes Booth. So
I
that's
did,
almost
so it's
close
very
enough.
close, exactly.
And then I came here when I was 13, and I had never had an allergy. I was one of those kids that almost never got the flu.
Right.
And about the first 10 years I lived here, I was sick all the time. And I just think there's different spores and flora and fauna and
really
weird
something
stuff out
different.
here that we're not used to, and fungus and all this stuff that comes out of the ground. We didn't grow up being used to it.
Absolutely, and I still there's a very odd thing. I'm kind of convinced to this day. I think I'm allergic to the fox lot because both times when especially when I did the 2 Bones episodes over there, I got this terrible sinus infection over there, and I'm convinced there's some bush over there that.
Or maybe it's like all the stuff they use to make the bodies.
It could be
the chemicals
It could
and
be
the
all
stuff
that
they
stuff,
use
all
to
the goo,
recreate
all the goo. I don't know what it
decomposition.
was, but invariably I got like this terrible sinus infection.
I used to wonder that all the time about people that worked in creature shops. Like,
oh, they
what's it
must
like to inhale that glue
all that,
and
that polyurethane,
all that stuff all the time? Yeah.
That would be a good study for you. You should work on that.
I think in all my spare time.
Yeah, you could
I
do
should
that.
start studying the history of people who get sick.
Exactly.
And I could have my own class action like the mesothelioma people.
Oh, perfect.
If you worked around fake dead bodies.
all of Rick Baker's, creature feature people.
Right.
Right. Oh,
Have you made monsters? Did you make gremlins?
you may be entitled to a cash payment.
Exactly. I love you on Bones. I wish you were a regular on Bones. Is it okay that I say that out loud?
Yeah, please.
I love your character.
I would
I
love
just
that.
had Michael Grant Terry in yesterday. He's one of my
really?
regulars here.
Oh, wow.
And he's amazing.
Yeah, he's terrific.
And he was talking sort of about how like a lot of your job when you're doing Bones is to sort of have to memorize what you're talking about, so it seems like you know what in the world you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. But the woman Donna over there, who's their technical advisor, I think that's her. It's been a year since I've been there, but she's terrific, and she prides herself that their show is like the number one in terms of getting everything right in terms of the science. I guess there's somebody out there who does follow these things.
Yeah.
And that is, because you can't. And I'm that way too. I can't memorize something until I know what it is I'm saying, and if I can't understand what I'm saying, so you really have to know like what is the plantar fascia, like all these these little medical terms.
And with you, it's feet. And how much
It was
time
all
in your
feet.
daily life do you really think about feet?
Very little.
Your autobiography could be called Meth and Feet.
Meth and Feet.
Because
Exactly.
those are the 2 things you really had to learn about.
Exactly.
for acting.
Yes.
And John Wilkes Booth.
And John Wilkes Booth.
No, I bet you were an amazing John Wilkes Booth.
Well, thank you. I think I was.
I can't imagine him singing.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, he has a great song in there where he's stuck in the barn and all the soldiers are outside
wonderful.
He's deserted, and he sings this whole song about how he did it for his country, and it's this really amazing song, and then he kills himself at the end of it, and it's terrific. I have this strong memory. I was just talking with a friend of mine who was in town from Chicago who had been in Assassins with me, and I was relating the story to him that I had we had a weekend of a 2-show Saturday and a 2-show Sunday, and we'd done the 2-show Saturday, and through various course of events, my 7-year girlfriend / fiance at the time, we ended up deciding to split up that night,
no.
and I had to go in the next day and do this matinee, and it was one of the hardest things to get through. I've had to do pretty much the first thing I have to do in the show is sit there and sing this kind of suicide song, and I got off stage and I just could not stop weeping because I'd been trying to hold it together to get the show done. And oh, God bless America, water has
Here
come
comes
in.
the water delivery girl.
Thank you,
Ronnie, the
Thank
water
you,
delivery
Gunga
girl. Is it? But isn't that's a hard thing, right? And the interesting thing about being an artist, I think, and one of the hardest things is that no matter what's going on in your life, you still have to show up and entertain people.
Entertain and try to put it aside and put that out of your mind. But it's hard. And my training as an actor is such that you have to use a large part of yourself, and if that's there, it's there. Hopefully it's appropriate. If it's not, then you really have to work to kind of get rid of it. But that case was very difficult that day. But anyway, it is. He actually sings a really beautiful song, and a few other beautiful songs, kind of some lovely ballads about how wonderful guns are and things like that. It's a very sick, twisted little
It's
show.
interesting when you think about it, because I think we grow up thinking that he was such a villain, and certainly he was a disturbed person.
Yes.
But he was kind of like a 19th century Timothy McVeigh. Like, he really believed that
Absolutely.
everything was messing up the country, and this is how he was going to fix it, that if he just got rid of Lincoln,
Absolutely.
then the South could rise again, and everything could go back to the way it was, and nobody would have to give up their slaves, and that he was defending our country from terrorists.
Yes.
But he thought the terrorists were the North.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of frightening how little history changes, but he was someone who that was his cause, and he believed in it 100%, and was willing to die for it. And it's in some ways, it's kind of sad that there's not more people who feel that way about. Well, I guess there are maybe some ways too many people who think they feel that way about this country.
Right.
But not justifiably so, I think. And and in the end, though, no matter what his justification was, obviously it was a terrible thing to do. But I also kind of, in the play I wrote, I kind of make the argument that in some ways, what he did actually helped kind of heal the country in some ways. Like, in some ways, I think Lincoln almost needed to be martyred for the country to heal, because even after the war was lost, the South was just waiting for him to come down and trample them and become a king and and a tyrant. And I think I wrote, because I'm a brilliant writer, Sheena, and I think I
did know that.
I think I wrote an analogy in there about, like, two kids who are running around their parents' house, fighting with each other, and while they're fighting, they accidentally knock over a vase that belonged, was a cherished vase of their mother's, and that shatters, and they instantly kind of stop and kind of, are so shocked at what they've done that they completely forgot what it is that they were fighting about. And in some ways, I think the killing of a president like that kind of did that, where it made both sides kind of go, whoa.
It's interesting. I don't think I've ever talked about this before. I've talked about some of this, but I don't know if you know this or not. I think I emailed you this once, but I kind of came out of the womb a Lincoln nut.
Yes, I think you did mention.
And when I was a very, very, very small child, like less than 5, and kids wanted to go to, Bunnyland or Legoville, I was bugging my parents to take me to places where Lincoln was. So between the time that I was 0 and the time that I was about 11, my mom took me to Kentucky, to the cabin, to where he served in Springfield, Illinois, to I saw where he was shot and the blood on the pillow. And the first pictures I ever took with my little black and white camera were the Lincoln Monument. And I was so excited that they're all like 5 times exposed because I forgot to move it over after I took the picture. So I purposely didn't go see Lincoln because I was nervous that it was going to make me feel icky if it wasn't beautiful. And finally over Easter, my mom was like, "Can we just see the Lincoln movie?" so we watched it on demand on Easter, and first of all, I thought it was beautifully done.
Yeah.
And it was much more beautiful than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But something that sort of never had occurred to me in all of my life of following Lincoln and loving Lincoln was really that there was a very much sort of like a Christ analogy with him. I mean, he
Very
did
much
kind
so.
of come up at a time where everything was going to hell, which was kind of the same thing in the historical Jesus, and sort of came for a reason, fixed the problem, and as soon as he put the ball in motion, then he was gone. And had he not died, he may have turned out to be, this is sad, but you're always a more popular president when you die.
Right.
And had he not died, things might not have worked out the way they did, but because the country went into mourning and they put him on the train and they took him everywhere for the world's longest funeral, it really made people think about the heinousness of that war and the heinousness of slavery. And when you see the most recent Lincoln film, I think you really sort of see how he was just trying to push that emancipation initiative through.
Right.
Because he knew that had to happen.
Absolutely. And he had premonitions, that he was going to be killed too.
Right.
I mean, he'd had dreams, and they both had. Booth had dreams, and Booth had prophecies as well too, given him by gypsy women that he was going to live a fast and short life. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, I really, again, in my brilliant play, Wilkes never produced.
But you should produce it. That's amazing.
I don't know.
Now more than ever, you should produce it.
I don't know if the world needs it, but I make those parallels that these guys, I kind of felt like in all the research I was doing, it's like they were destined to meet in some way or another. That that Lincoln loved theater so much, I mean, it was all
Right.
kind of a perfect setup. He loved going to the theater, and even within Booth's family, I mean, he was kind of the only one really that was a true Southerner, because they grew up in Delaware, and that was kind of,
Right.
and in Maryland, and that kind of border state where you could go either way, and
Right.
So
And people did. I mean, growing up there in northeastern Maryland.
Yeah.
For my last stop as a kid before we came out here to Los Angeles, every historic home, every other historic home was, the attic was where they hid the Southern soldiers. So really, it was
Yeah.
technically it was a northern state.
right,
But it was so Southern sympathizing.
so Southern.
And if you talk to, first, second, third, fifth, 10th generation Baltimoreans, and you tell them that they're from the North, they will correct you.
Wow.
Because they're proud to be sons and daughters of the South.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they really, really consider themselves Southerners.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. And did you ever read the book Confederates in the Attic?
I have not, no.
Do you know about that book?
No.
It's I'd read it just a couple of years ago, and I guess it was already 10 years old by that time. I thought I had discovered some new book, but it had been out a long time, and I can't remember the author's name. I have to look it up. But it's an author who kind of similarly was a big Civil War nut, like yourself, had like Civil War wallpaper in his room as a kid. And
Me
all that
too.
kind of
I had
stuff.
the whole Civil War bedroom.
Yeah. So he kind of goes down south, and I guess it was in the late 90s. I think he did it, and kind of travels around visiting all the major battle sites down there to see like what are almost 100 years after the war, or more than 100 years after the war, rather, like almost 150 years after the war, what are the state of things? How prevalent is the war still down there? And he ends up hanging out with a lot of reenactors, Civil War reenactors, and it's a pretty fascinating book to see like it still resonates so much.
Yes. Absolutely.
In so many places down there. And some places that are more surprising, again, places that are closer to the north in Kentucky, things like that, I think he found the most difficult in some ways. But the Civil War reenactors are amazing and hilarious, and the things they go through, and that whole cult of getting it right and being really accurate in your clothing.
yeah.
And if
They're
you're,
fantastic,
And if you're
right?
not, I mean, you're really snubbed if you have if you get some kind of modern cloth, to make your
Right.
jacket
Yes,
out of. And if
exactly.
your buttons aren't authentically made of bone or what have you, you're really, I think they call them farbs, whatever that is.
Right.
And they all have their specialties. There's one guy who's really good at the bloat, he calls it, which he can somehow puff himself out to look like he's been a body decomposing. I mean, it's a really wonderful
That's
book,
fantastic.
but you might like it because it's really it's a really kind of fascinating study about.
Well, and I
all that
remember
stuff.
going to all that. Do you remember that as a kid in Connecticut?
Oh, sure.
Going to the Civil War reenactments and the Revolutionary War
Revolutionary
reenactments?
War, a lot more, and
Yeah.
going down to Williamsburg, Virginia, too.
Oh,
and,
amazing.
all
And
those-
Jamestown?
Jamestown.
Amazing.
Yeah, all those, where they're still living like it's 1692.
Have
Yeah.
you seen that? Somebody just yesterday saw, I guess there was an article on the internet that they read to me that they found bones in Jamestown that they think were cannibalized.
Oh, yeah, I just saw the headline of it. I didn't
Yeah.
read the article.
So-
like a little girl had been...
Somebody ate a little girl. Well, they were hungry. It was slim pickings.
And she's fresh.
It makes you wonder if maybe that's what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke.
Oh.
Remember, they never could
that's
figure
right.
out because there was no disturbance, nothing was moved, food was still on the tables or whatever food there was.
Interesting.
Once you've,
It was just a barbecue.
It was just a barbecue. That's why there was no remains.
Wow.
See where we go when we start with bones?
Oh, man.
So why have you never produced your play?
I did. I did a few readings of it back in Chicago years ago. I think like 3 or 4. And the last one I did was for the literary staff of like Steppenwolf and the Goodman and like
Sure.
all the big theaters in town. And it went really well. And kind of the universal response, everyone's like, we really like the play, we like the writing in the play. The subject matter is just not something we want to deal with. and I just got very cranky about it, and I was like, well,
I think
forget
the
it.
subject matter is
I don't wanna
so
put
much
it-
more important now than ever.
Yeah, maybe it is. I mean, I haven't looked. I should look at it. I mean, my memories of it now, I feel like it was a little bit too much. It kind of, especially as I've learned more about, and going to see more plays, and I learn more about writing as I go along. I think it was I think I overreached quite a lot in it. I tried to, encapsulate too much of his life and his story in it. I kind of said it that he's in this limbo where he kind of has to keep playing through his life over and over again until he gets the ending, the hero's ending, because he thought he was going to be treated like a hero. He thought in doing this,
Right.
he was going to go down south and he'd be carried on the shoulders of all his southern brethren, and they're going to start the war back up, and he was going to be
Right. Well, but you
a
know
hero.
what? He may very well have been.
Yeah,
Had things gone differently.
Yes, absolutely.
Or had it happened before the emancipation passed.
Yes.
I mean, all different things, all different time.
Absolutely, and there had, he had other he had tried to kidnap Lincoln once. His original plan was just to kidnap him, to use him as a bargaining chip, because what was going on. This has become a whole show about.
Oh, this is
Booth,
fantastic.
but he was going to, all the prisoners of war. Kind of the feeling was that the North was able to continually build up their armed forces through immigrants coming into the country. Whereas the South had a very limited number of soldiers, and
the Irish.
Exactly, and as the prisoner of war camps kept building, the South was running out of soldiers, and that's what was happening towards the end of the war. And so Booth thought, if he could kidnap Lincoln and use him as a bargaining chip and get all those Southern soldiers freed, they could replenish their troops and they could keep fighting and take the day. And that was his original plan, and it failed. He continually surrounded himself with knuckleheads, I think one could say.
Right. Well, I think whenever you have sort of that terrorist mentality, there's a lot of people in there who just want to fight to fight.
Right, exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of people who are just crazy.
Yeah.
But then there are also people who are considering themselves very much to have a political agenda.
Right.
Sometimes it's crazy, and sometimes it's not. And you can very much say, well, the South was wrong and the North was right. And certainly I'm a Lincoln lover and I'm a Yankee, so of course I believe that.
Right.
But also, I'm Irish, and I know that a lot of the Irish who were fighting against the English and were considered terrorists and were considered criminals, and they considered themselves to be political prisoners.
Yep.
Because basically somebody changed the rules of their land and they just wanted to go back to the way it was. And whether it was right or wrong, I mean, certainly slavery is very, very wrong, but for them, that was their way of life and that was their livelihood, and somebody was taking it away. And it's an interesting thing, and I'm a Yankee, but my mom is from Kentucky, so I'm a granddaughter of the South.
Wow.
And so I'm not saying that there was anything right about it, except that I understand that their mentality was that they were fighting for their way of life.
Was there a fight within your family about that?
No, because my mother was orphaned. My mother was adopted. And so my adopted grandparents were my grandfather was born in Oklahoma and then relocated to Poughkeepsie.
Oh,
and my
okay.
grandmother was from Poughkeepsie.
Oh, okay.
So, no, there was never, but I can tell you with her birth family, whom I have met a few times, I certainly think that probably, they think the
There's some
Emancipation
issues.
Proclamation was a major problem.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly in the South, they still have that feeling.
It was the Obamacare of its time.
It definitely was. So where were you? Are your birth parents were from the Connecticut area?
My birth father actually was. My birth father grew up in Waterbury, Connecticut, where my dad worked at Waterbury Hospital growing up, as I was growing up, oddly enough. And he grew up. His father, I guess, was a Romanian Jewish immigrant who started making ladies ready-to-wear clothing and selling it from a pushcart in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Made enough money, moved the family over from Romania, opened a store up in Waterbury, and became a huge success there. Had the equivalent of, I guess, like a department store up there. So he grew up. Al was his name, Abraham Al. Grew up, fairly well-to-do until the crash and all that came around. But my birth mother was born down in the Ozarks, down in southern Missouri, in Joplin, which was that town
Sure.
that got blown away.
I have a very good friend from Joplin.
Oh, okay. So you know, I mean, it's a very
Right.
and she was
It's where the South meets the Midwest.
Exactly, yes. And she was, as she likes to say, literally born in a log cabin.
Right.
Raised Pentecostal down there, but her dad moved to they moved mostly to San Diego when she was young, and he worked as a civilian down at the Navy base down there, working on the airplanes and things like that. So she grew up mostly down in San Diego, but then moved back to St. Louis. And that's where they met. And my birth father was about 20 years older than her, and he was working for Zales Jewelry Store.
Oh, wow.
When Zales was just going around the country and buying up, all these mom and pop jewelry stores.
Before Jane Seymour and the Swan.
Yes, exactly. And she worked at one of the stores that Zales had bought up, and so he was her boss actually there, and he kind of asked her out, and they ended up going out, and that's kind of how they met. And then he got transferred up to Denver, Colorado, and she got pregnant, and because he was about 51 at the time or so, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage who were grown, but he was still paying a lot of child support and alimony to his first wife, and he just, I think, maybe felt like he couldn't afford another kid. He wasn't that far away from retirement, and so he, kind of gave her a choice, lose the kid or lose me kind of thing, and she, looked at herself and said, she was a 30-year-old woman with a high school education, and it's 1964, and what is she going to do with her life? Is she going to raise a child on her own and lose, the man she loves? And so she kind of, I think as a lot of women did back then, just felt like she had no choice. And so it happened. And, and they went through an interesting transference later on. And they got married about 6 months after I was born, and eventually moved down to the Atlanta area and settled in Marietta, where Gail is from, is where my birth parents lived when I found them.
Right.
And my birth father, when he was about 71, my birth mom had gotten back into church and helped start a church down in Douglasville there. And he ended up getting converted when he was 71. He had a series of illnesses, and the pastor at the church had ended up kind of laying hands on him and healing him, and he converted from Judaism to Pentecostal at the age of 71. And I had at his funeral about 4 years after I found them and met them, I had so many of the people down there telling me about how, when he got the Holy Spirit, how he just started running laps around the gym, even though he'd had this terrible circulation problem in his legs. And
wow.
It's been, it was an amazing thing. And to go down there, and I've been to their church and, seen the speaking in tongues and all the stuff that goes on down there, and, stayed in regular contact with them. And
it's wonderful.
Was with him, shortly before he passed away, and I still talk to my birth mom. She's in Israel right now, actually. She's going to be 80 in June, and she's off in Israel, and she's kind of like busier than ever. She's kind of a dynamo. So they're pretty amazing people. But it was, the first meeting I was about 33, and at that age, to all of a sudden see people you look like, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's very
strange.
It's very strange, but very grounding, and again, the nature versus nurture, just gestures that I've always used that they use, and sense of humor, and still with my birth mom, we had a conversation a few weeks ago, and she was talking about how scared she was as a little kid of certain things, and I was like, I was too, and we have a lot of similarities. That it's really fascinating. Stuff that's just in you. Yeah.
No, what's her ethnicity?
She is Dutch Irish.
Okay.
And he was Romanian. Yeah, that was one of those mysteries always. That girlfriends always, throughout college and high school and whatnot. That was always the mystery when I didn't have any knowledge of my genetic history. That was
isn't that funny?
That was the big guessing game. It was like, oh, I think you're Mexican. I think you're Greek.
Oh no, I always thought that you were. I always thought that you were either Irish or Jewish or both. And every time that I would see you, I would think, is he Irish or is he Jewish? Because sometimes I would think yes, then I would think no, and
both.
And then
now,
right. were you raised Jewish?
I was raised Jewish. Yeah, because Al had arranged the adoption, and he had arranged it through a Jewish adoption agency in Denver. So I was, he wanted me to go to a Jewish family at that time, and so I was raised Jewish. But we dropped out of our temple when I was about 8 years old because my mom had a fight with the rabbi after my brother's bar mitzvah, and so we kind of dropped out after that. Right. And I was just about to start Hebrew school, so I never got like all the cross pens and all those nice gifts you get.
Yeah, you didn't get all the bar mitzvah gifts.
Never.
So you were raised culturally Jewish, but not religiously so.
Yes. So I always say I'm more Ish than Jew.
Yeah. But there's a lot of Irish in your face.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, which is probably why you made a good Wilkes Booth.
I guess so.
There's a lot of Irish in there.
That black Irish kind of thing.
Yeah, the black Irish gene. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always teach you that you look like George Clooney. But you do.
Well,
it's that dark Irish gene. So
it's interesting.
I mean, you gotta look like somebody. I guess
I guess so.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. And I've said, when I met Helen and Al, and or actually even when I just first got pictures of them, I said it was a bit like facial Jenga or something, to be able to see like, oh, there's my jawline, that's from him, there's my eyes, that's from her, and to kind of put it all together, who gave me what is.
But it is a fascinating exercise in nature versus nurture.
It really is.
Because there really are. I remember the first time I saw my birth aunt, and she met us in Las Vegas, and because the Irish like to go to Vegas. And we were, because there's free booze and gambling. It's two of our vices.
Perfect.
And I saw her, she and my mom were walking towards the casino, towards me. And I'd never seen a face I looked so much like my mother, and I'd never seen a face that looked like ours before.
Wow.
And there she was. And it's so interesting, and so many of the mannerisms were the same. And personality-wise, they were nothing alike. I mean, they couldn't have been farther.
Oh, is that right?
No, very, very, very different. But their faces were so close.
Similar. Isn't that interesting?
So interesting. But I think most people just take for granted, like, I look like this cousin, and I look like this. And when you grow up kind of like you don't really know anybody you look like.
No, it's true. And I think, like, the whole thing, I'm hoping when I eventually become a father, will make me a little more patient with my children to understand, that there's certain things, this is just who they are. There are certainly learned behaviors, and I know, so I have a much clearer perception now of what I got from my parents who raised me, what I learned from them, and now to be able to add into, the other side of that, to see like, oh, that's just what's in me because that's what's in me, either medically or psychologically.
Sure.
Because, I mean, that's, and like I said, I still, 2 weeks ago learned something new, like, oh, that's where that comes from, that was just in me because my parents who raised me weren't scaredy cats.
Right.
Why was I such a scaredy cat as a little kid? Why did I have to have that night lighted? Why did I have the door cracked open so the whole light could come in?
and the fascination with John Wilkes Booth, and here you were, a good Connecticut boy,
a
good Yankee like me, but also a grandson of the South.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got that in you too, and I do think that kind of thing sort of lives inside of your soul.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And it was because I did get to go down and spend a day after Thanksgiving. My brother lives in St. Louis, as I said, and I drove down after spending Thanksgiving with him and his family. I drove down to Joplin where they were with her family down there, big family, including her dad, my birth grandfather, who was still alive at the time. He was 94, and I got to meet him and have him tell me about farming back during the Dust Bowl and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, he's
resilient people.
And but it was like, it's a lot to take in at that age. I mean, I barely keep up with my own family, my regular family,
right?
And to all of a sudden have this huge welcoming. And she had, and Helen had told them all that the baby had died in childbirth, 30-something years ago, and so she had to kind of let them know that wasn't accurate. And to meet them all, they just were so welcoming and so warm, and continue to be to me so much, and they always are wanting me to come down and visit. And it's just, it's hard to have time to, like, well, I barely get to see these people, I got to go see them, but I will get down to you when I can, kind of thing.
Right. And that's kind of a hard thing, I think, in general, is that it's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was always this hard, or maybe people just had less people in their life, but they stayed
closer to them too. I mean, there wasn't
right,
and
they were close, so you'd see them all at once.
Yeah.
But as many times as I try to keep up on all my friends that I have to go have lunch with, have coffee with, touch base with, follow up on things, it's when I'm not working with people, it's so hard to remember to keep up on them because there's so many lunches and so many dinners in a week.
Yes.
And ideally, I would like to see them all once a week.
Right.
But I wish I could tell you I had 5 to 7 friends, which I guess that would be very lonely. But
yes, exactly.
But there's just too many people that I want to see all the time.
Yeah, especially out here.
Yeah.
That's that strange LA
and maybe in a smaller place, you'd get together and 30 people would be in one room and you'd see them all at one time.
Well, that's, I mean, Chicago, I felt that way very much because, every corner had a neighborhood bar on it, and if your friends lived anywhere near you, you'd all just say, hey, let's go meet down at Simon's, and you'd go down there and you could see 10 people at a time. Or you're just on the L and you run into people. I think out here, especially just being in your car so much, it's hard. I mean, I have friends of mine who, live not far from here, which isn't that far from where I live, but I haven't seen them in like a year.
Yeah. Well, and even all of you from Curious Folk that tried. I know you guys try to get together
absolutely
for events and stay together and get together for it, but it's hard.
It's hard, and I certainly have worked at it over the years, and it just takes an effort. You have to kind of make it a priority if you want to, and I think as we've each gotten busier and busier in our own way, it's gotten harder and harder, and kind of moved on with other projects in our life. But if you make it a priority, it can happen. And when we do see each other, it's great. I think
it's wonderful. I think it's a beautiful thing about art when you pick up family as you go.
Yeah.
I think that's for all the icky things about our business, that's one of the best things, I think.
And I think that's, in some aspect for me, of being adopted, I think that's kind of part of what goes on there too. It's like, I had a family choose me. I had parents, but then I had a family choose me.
Right.
And I think in some ways I keep kind of doing that myself. I know I make an effort everything I work on to create a family out of it. That's very important to me.
Yeah. I do that too, and that may be the same thing. It may be those orphan roots.
I think
I do the same thing, that I'm always trying to create. It's very important to me that I create a chosen family.
Yeah.
It was interesting because my dad was sick last year. I know, and he passed in the summer.
Yeah.
And he was not close to his family. And he was not my birth father. So his family, I don't even know if they know that, but they have not. I don't even know if I ever talked about that on the air, but I guess it's True Confessions Day.
Yes,
Scott.
there we go. Thank you.
But he was not close to his family, and my mom was not terribly close to her adopted family, and many of them have now passed, and barely knew her birth family.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in the the place where they hold you at pre-op before he had his brain surgery, and there were all these people gathered around different people in there, and with us it was just the three of us.
Wow.
And I don't have kids, and I thought, she will be taken care of forever,
right,
because I will take care of her.
Right.
But if you don't have kids and you don't have a built-in family and you don't work to create a chosen family, then what happens to you when that's you at the end of your life? I mean, it's most families. I think the way the family system was set up before maybe the second half of the 20th century was, grandparents, and then they all had kids, and then their kids had kids, and everybody got married, and everybody had more kids. So that even if something happened and your spouse couldn't be there, or sibling couldn't be there, somebody's sister-in-law would come or a cousin would come, and everybody was together.
Yeah, very much so.
And it's very much changed now.
Yeah, I mean I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my mom I know went through that. She was an only child, and her parents divorced when she was about 8 or so, and she chose to go with her dad, and her dad ended up passing away when she was about 15, and he came from a family of 8 kids, and she just went to go live with them.
Yeah.
That was just kind of how it went.
Yeah.
And they raised her the rest of the way, because her mom had kind of moved on to other things in her life, and so that kind of nuclear family, I don't know what it is, but it's kind of hard, and it's a lot more disparate now. It feels like it's a lot more, everyone kind of spreads out. I think there's a lot more of that instinct to leave home.
Right.
But now, I don't know. I mean, I wonder with the economy as it's been. I think you certainly read about a lot more people having to move back home to their parents' house.
A lot of people are now living with 4 or 5 friends in a house. I mean, we're becoming more communal by necessity.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also think that as artists, that we, no matter where we live in the world, we're used to, you start to do a play, and within a week, that's your family.
Yeah.
And that stays your family for 6, 8 weeks, a year, however long the run is, and then you take a couple of those people, become your family forever.
Yep.
Or like a show where you guys were together for 6 years and became a family. I mean, I think it's natural for us as artists, and maybe because the reason that a lot of us are artists, then we adapt so well to this crazy lifestyle, is because we weren't raised with that traditional, this is one mommy and one daddy and one sister and one brother, that we're used to being able to make family fast.
That could be. And it's also, the things, in terms of theater especially, and film and TV as well too. It's like you're forced into these very vulnerable, intimate situations, and just in terms of revealing yourself so quickly.
Right.
And you have to just have these bonds. I mean, I find sometimes even doing a reading of a play, maybe you have a couple rehearsals and then you do the reading of it. Even then, you feel like you've gone through, a war together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's, it's like, jumping off a building, and you have to be there with each other, and you have to trust these people. And if the trust is there and it's lived up to, you have this bond all of a sudden instantly, and it's just, it's a very unusual thing.
Well, I think even when you do, like you said, a table read of a play or of a new television show or whatever you're doing, you make a friend during that time, and you find somebody you walk to the parking lot with, and then that becomes somebody that you know the next time. It's just it's a very bondy way of life,
Yeah.
and I like that. And I get confused sometimes when people say, this is the loneliest town and the loneliest business, and I
Yeah.
think, God, there's just friends everywhere to be made.
Right. When you're working.
When you're working. But if not,
I
you
think the
can be...
lonely part is when you're not working.
Oh, that just
and,
sucks.
Yeah, and you're just sitting in your apartment and where's everybody? Oh, they're working and I'm not.
But you can also be working when you're not working. I mean, our
Yes,
theater
absolutely.
scene.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
like our theater scene here is so vibrant and so wonderful.
It's great.
It would be a wonderful place for perhaps like a young man who's written a play about John Wilkes Booth to get it produced. But
she's
you know what I
still
mean?
working
I
on it.
mean, there's so many things going on out here that
Yes.
even when you're not technically working, collecting a paycheck working, usually you're doing something,
Yes,
a play,
yes.
or like you now are working with the Young Playwrights Festival.
Yes, absolutely. Work with
And
Young Playwrights
that's
Festival.
something to do, and that's a
Yep.
creative thing that you're doing.
Yep, and Young Storytellers I also work with out here too, which
Oh,
is
I don't
a
know
great
about that.
organization. Young Storytellers is another wonderful group, but you can all look them up online. They essentially go into schools throughout LA, and they work with kids usually in like the 5th or 6th grade kind of range, 9, 10, 11 years old. And they send 10 mentors into the school to work with 10 kids one-on-one for about 6 or 7 weeks and
wonderful.
teach them to write these little screenplays. And then at the end of that, we put on a big show where we bring in all these actors who read their scripts and a big performance either for their parents and the other students in the school. And it's amazing. I've done it for quite a few years. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And to see these kids, like to see that spark of creativity in them, and that they can, to see something they've written. They do a very wonderful thing where they generally put the writer and their mentor kind of right by the side of the stage while it's being performed, kind of in front of the audience, so you can also watch the kids watching their play come to life. And that's my favorite part. Like, I watch them more than the actual plays, and they're just so delighted. It's really wonderful.
That's fantastic. Now, how long
Yeah.
have you been with Young Playwrights? I know we've talked a little bit about that.
Young Playwrights I've been with, I want to say only maybe 3 years, 4 years now.
Okay.
I acted in 2 shows. I didn't get to do it last year, so this would be my 4th year working with them. But I started last year being on their selection committee.
Okay.
Reading through the plays, and this was my 2nd year doing that as well too. And I don't know if I'll be acting again this year or not with them. I think they're just starting that process of figuring out
I think so
with
too.
all the plays. So.
Usually they send me an email when it's getting ready to go, so we can start trying to get as many on before.
Before
go
it's
time.
going on. But it's a wonderful thing, and the blank is great, and Daniel has done a wonderful job in this, their 21st year.
Isn't that exciting?
Doing it, which is amazing.
I just went out and saw the new Peter Pan.
Oh, how's it? I
Michael
wanna go
Matthews
see
directed.
that.
It was wonderful.
Oh, good.
It was just wonderful. I think they're going to be here with me on Tuesday all day, the whole
great.
cast. And interesting. It's kind of an interesting, dark. We're going to like the book.
Yeah, that's what Daniel had said. I want to go see that. I want to go see American Misfit up at Boston Court. There's a couple of really
Boston
interesting
Court's
things.
terrific, right?
It's a great place.
Do you do a lot of stuff up there? Have you
I've done
stuff
one
there?
play up there. I did Pain in the Itch up there back in 2009, I think. Yeah, I love that place. It's a beautiful theater.
Is it hard to find time to do plays? I mean, I know I'm always asking you about live theater, and I'm always bugging you to do more plays.
Yes.
You're like, gosh, shut up with the play talk.
No.
But I mean, is it hard to find the time to?
It is hard.
To give up the 2 months, the month of rehearsal, and the 6 weeks of run.
It is. I mean, I have a dilemma right now that a director I've done 3 plays with down here, Damaso Rodriguez, who I first worked with on Orson Shadows at Pasadena Playhouse.
Wonderful.
And then Pain in the Itch, and then I also did Blithe Spirit with him, and we've done a number of other collaborations. But he just became our artistic director of a theater up in Portland called Artist Residence Theater, I think. And he's starting his first season as artistic director this coming fall, and the first play he's doing is this wonderful play called The Big Meal he wants me to do. And it's in August, and it's in August, I think, September, with rehearsals and the run and everything. And it's a dilemma. I want to go, but that's when all the TV shows are just getting back to work here.
Right.
So
all the guest star roles start happening.
So can I afford to go out of town then? It's tricky. I mean, that's kind of
hard.
the tough thing of balancing the commerce with. I mean, I really want to do this play, but it's a smaller theater that I'll get some salary, but not a lot. And can I afford to do it? It's kind of the big question and dilemma. If I could get a couple good jobs in beforehand, I'd feel very comfortable, but I don't know if I can let those 2 months go by. So that out here especially, it does get tricky because it's there are a lot fewer theaters that can kind of pay you a living wage to where it's worth it to miss out on auditioning for things, because I had the problem even here in town. It's tough for me if I'm working on a show. That's my focus,
Right.
And to get auditions in the middle of that,
It's
and,
hard.
It's really hard for me to do. I find. I mean, you do it, you have to, but
Right.
it's
you learn to
difficult.
switch. I did a play at the end of 2012, and it's you have to get used to. I had to get used to switching from this to that.
Oh, yeah.
Of being here and being this, and
Yes.
then going there and doing
Oh,
that.
it must have
and
been
it just
hard.
takes you a while to sort of get used to splitting your brain in half.
Yeah.
And then it's okay.
Yeah.
But I think the rehearsal time sort of gets you used to that switch.
Yeah.
And we did an interesting thing where because of my schedule, I did this during the week, and the two of the main leads rehearsed during the week, and the rest of us all rehearsed on the weekends for me.
Oh,
So
smart.
because we were all on stage so much of the time, so I didn't really have to start doing the switch until shows.
Oh, that's great.
But it was, you do what you got to do.
Yeah,
But it is
yeah.
hard because your head wants to be. There's something about a play, right? Your head really wants to be in it all the time.
Yeah, you really need to focus, and it's something, when it's good and and you really love it, you're thinking about it all day long, even before you get to the theater that night. So
Right,
it's-
yes.
And that's kind of where it gets tricky, and especially with auditioning too, to stuff more lines into your head even for a little while. It's just
Yes.
it's hard, and I found that especially when I did when I did Blithe Spirit a few years ago. With A Noise Within, and they run their shows in rep up there too,
Right.
so they have 3 plays going kind of at the same time, and but because of their budget, there's not like a lot of repertory theaters. If they have big budgets, they can you can do a play one night and then push a button and like that set disappears and another set pops up kind
Right.
of thing. But they don't have that, so they need a lot more time to kind of change sets over and things like that. So I remember we opened the play and then we literally didn't do it again. I think for 4 weeks. Like almost a whole month while they previewed,
Right.
teched, previewed, and opened the next show, and then gave that a week to run. And I had, at least 80% of the lines in Blithe Spirit, and it's Noel Coward, and you have to be precise, and you have to know that. And and we had a lot of gaps like that of a week, 2
Right.
weeks, things
I
like
love
that.
Blithe Spirit, too.
And
What
it's a
a
great
amazing-
show, but it was really, really hard. And I feel like I don't think I listened to my car radio in that entire month or 2 months of that run of that show, because I was always just running lines in the car because I was so terrified I was going to forget them. And that was definitely a time where like to cram more lines in for auditions and things at that time was really, really hard for me. And I think I got a little picky about like it's got to be really worth it for me
Right.
to want
Right.
to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's a student zombie movie,
Yes.
you're gonna let that go during
that
Blithe
might
Spirit.
go. That might go.
Tell me about, because we're talking about if you went to Portland to do this play. So what?
Yeah.
I think that we have an idea now that because of the internet, that actors don't have to be in town anymore to audition, but that's not true, right? I mean, most places you do wind up having to go.
Yeah,
and
I
sit
wish
in front
it,
of casting
Yes,
agents.
yeah, I wish it was more true. I think if you're maybe at a certain level, that can happen. But yeah, I've tried. I made it my goal this year to. I really love the play Clybourne Park that won the Pulitzer.
It's wonderful.
It's
Yeah,
a great
sure.
it's a great play, and Bruce Norris, who I know from Chicago, and then I did his play The Pain and the Itch out here, and he's just a wonderful writer, and I love that play. And there's this 2-character role in it that is just perfect for me, and I love it. And so I kind of made it my goal to look at like all the regional theaters, because it was it had its Broadway run last year, so this is the year now all the regional theaters want to do it, and and let my agents in New York know, I want to get in on these things. And, again, it's a tough thing. Some of these theaters, pay maybe $500 a week.
Right.
And so for me to spend $500 to fly in to audition just for the possibility of getting it, it's kind of like not really, doesn't make a lot of sense to
Right.
me in some ways. So, I request to put myself on tape, and I work really hard on it and do a really good job, and I think it came out really well. And I don't even know that it ever got seen, because there is, and I kind of get it, like when you have people in the room there with you who you could, as a director,
Right.
you can
They're
talk with.
seeing you
and
when
deal
they-
with.
right, yeah.
So, and I think the same goes for, film and TV stuff out here too. It's like, I know from experience there is something, there's that whole thing of being good in the room, and some people can do that and not, because they also, beyond wanting to see what you can do with the part, they want to see, is this someone I want to work with? And I don't know that you can get that all the time from just going on tape. I talked to a cast. I did a play at in Williamstown Theater Festival back in the Berkshires last summer. Production of Elephant Man back there.
Right,
and
amazing.
which was great. And the casting director for that, who was a terrific guy, we had a talk one night at the bar afterwards. He was saying that a lot of casting directors are starting to use Skype, I guess,
Yeah,
to
I've heard
audition
that
with,
too.
you know,
Yeah,
so
right.
that the director can kind of give you things, but a lot of casting directors just hate it. And I wish they would kind of get more into it and embrace it a little bit more because, look, I live out here. This is where I live, but I want to go back east and do some
Right.
stuff, you know, and it's too expensive to expect an actor to fly back for an audition. I think it's really crazy. And if you have the means technologically to get at least a feel, and again, and I've said this with all the things I put on tape, I said, look, if this just whets your appetite and you go like, yeah, we really like what you're doing there,
Right.
could you come in?
Then I'll come.
I would come in.
I'll get a red eye.
Yeah, if I know the chance is more,
Right.
you know, in the
I'll
80,
call Southwest and there's 27 stops on the way there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, let me know that I'm more in the 80-90 percentile than it's just a 50-50 shot or something, you know, or less. For me to spend this kind of money.
Yeah,
'Cause,
I agree.
So
Well, and I think it also depends on who the casting agent is and
Yes.
I have an actress that does my show on a regular basis, and she was talking about how she got a voiceover part in Life of Pi. And basically, in the middle of it all, she did it here, and she did sort of an audition with Ang Lee, and then she had to go to New York. And she thought, and they called her, of course, right when she got to New York, and she thought, well, that's the end of it. This isn't happening now.
Right.
And they're like, no, he'll Skype with you.
Oh wow.
And so he did a Skype session with her from New York and had her lay down what he wanted, and then it wound up making it in the movie.
Wow.
So it just depends sometimes too with who you're
Absolutely.
and where they're at with the idea of Skype and
Yeah.
things being done. Because certainly look at now voiceover artists.
Oh, yeah.
Are doing so much from just everyone has a home studio.
From a closet in their house.
You send
absolutely.
it in and then it's rocking and rolling. And so
Yeah.
I think eventually they're going to get to the point where they're okay with that.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I had an audition out here just the other day with, and the casting director was a little older, and she's like, "Do you have your headshot and resume with you?" And I said, "No, I mean, I just don't bring one with me anymore."
Right,
You know,
because it's already been emailed in.
It's emailed in. It's on. You know, and I said, "No, I'm kind of new school," and she's like, "Oh, well, I'm old school." I said, "Well, I get that. I guess it's nice to have something concrete in your hands." But yeah, I mean, so there's still people out there who just really want to do it that old way, where you know. And
you would think, and I'm not a casting director, so I should probably shut up, but I am a talk radio host, so I'll keep
Exactly.
talking. You would think that that from a casting agent's perspective for film and television, that they would rather see what you look like
Right.
on video
Right.
than to have you sitting in front of them.
Well, that has changed, at least in terms of testing for shows now, which is great, because you know you used to, for you know, forever and ever, when you would test for a show, you would go into some room somewhere, you know, at the network or at the studio's headquarters, and you would sit in front of, you know, a lot of people in suits who are accountants and things, and you would act out the scene from this television show in front of them, and they would watch you, and it's always a very strange experience,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
especially if it's a comedy, because they don't laugh, because they're kind of like, I always said, it's a bit like, you know, going to like a horse sale or something, where they're looking at your teeth and they're checking, you know, they want to see, like, you know, can this pony run? Or
They lift up your tail.
Exactly, they lift up
to
your
make
tail.
sure that
yes.
your anal glands look
Exactly.
okay. Right.
Mine look amazing.
Right. Yes, I know. Mine are in good shape too.
So it's really, really peculiar. But the weirdest part of it has always seemed to me, it's like, well, this is stuff we're doing on film. Like, what is this telling you?
Yes.
But so they have started, finally, now they do just tape them.
Right.
And then, you know, pass them on to people and pass them around.
And don't you also think, because we know that you know, a lot of the casting agent's life is the actor coming in and really trying to sell themselves,
Right.
and doing more than just what's required and
Right.
what's on the page.
Yes.
That wouldn't it be easier as a casting director if you never had to see any of these people that you profess bug the hell out of you?
Right.
And you could just sit in your little office and get your email submissions,
Yep.
watch who you like,
Yep.
and then maybe for, like, you know, the last callback,
Yeah.
bring back some people you want to meet in person.
Yeah,
I would think that they would be so much more cost effective and convenient for them to do it that way.
I would think so too. I think there's, you know, maybe there's, and again, I get this too. I mean, I think, you know, good casting directors are some of the most creative people in the industry, and I think there is an element where they like to be able to work with you
Sure.
in the room too. I think that's the only thing. And sometimes, you know, I mean, I can make some good choices, but they're not always good choices, and it's great. It is often great to have somebody in the room to say, okay, good, but let's try to. I think it's a little more this. And you go, oh, because you sometimes don't have all the information you need just from the piece of paper in front of you, you know, and you need to have someone explain things to you or know the nuances of something. or especially styles, of shows if you haven't seen them.
Yeah, I guess that is true. That sometimes they want to kind of coach you through the audition.
Yeah, and if they're good, that's great. I love that. So I don't know if it can completely eliminate it, but I think certainly if the option isn't there, and again, for the person to be there physically, I think there should be some more openness to like these Skype sessions and things like that. I wish there was a little bit more of that. I think there is some out there, but
I think there is some too.
But there should be.
But it'd be neat if there was more.
Yeah, because that would be while I'm up in Portland, it certainly would be great to be able to still audition. I mean, it would be difficult then if I got something to have to come down here and
right.
I don't know what.
But there's so many shows now, right? That tape in Portland.
Yes, they do. Absolutely.
And there's so many shows in Vancouver, and you're 2/3 of the way there.
Not too far from there. Yeah, I know Dean Devlin has been a big proponent of who Leverage was his last show, and
right. I know Grimm Films up there.
Grimm Films up there. So a lot of shows are trying to get more of an infrastructure up there, kind of like what they were doing in Toronto years ago.
Right, and then in Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly.
And now they're doing it in Portland.
Yeah.
And when is California going to realize that
God.
If we just offered maybe 2 or 3 incentives,
right,
we could help our own economy?
Well, it's part of the reason I'd like to go up there and work too, to kind of explore that. Like, what is it? Maybe I'm done with LA. Maybe I should become a Portland actor.
Do you think maybe sometimes you're done with LA?
Sometimes I feel LA is done with me.
Oh no. Do you think that you're? It's funny because I was, Okay, this is like a long story that probably is boring, but I was at the eye doctor.
Oh, here we go.
And somehow we got on the subject of my age,
mm-hmm.
and how it seems like sort of, everything fell apart in the last 2 years, and I'm just waiting for it all to fall back into place. And he said that there's a part in your life,
mm-hmm.
which is where I am and probably where you are too, where your body is trying to make the transition between being a young person
mm-hmm.
and being an old person.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't quite know what to do. And I think sometimes that as actors, you get stuck in that same place where you're not yet the crusty old guy, but you're no longer the rebel without a cause.
Right.
And what do they do with you in between? And I think especially for character actors, that could be a hard place. And I think another hard thing for you is that you're a character actor, but you're very good looking. I think if you were really funky looking, then you would be on Sons of Anarchy.
Right.
But it's hard to know what to do with you because you don't look like a drug dealer and you don't look like a killer. You don't look like you've been in prison.
Yeah, it's definitely been a dilemma, and I feel like I think I've always been a crusty old guy waiting to be a crusty old guy,
too.
And even when I first got to Chicago, the first people who kind of wanted to be my agents there said, we're going to take you on, but we're kind of going to put you on hold for a bunch of years until you kind of grow, until you essentially age into what the guy we think you are inside. And so it's kind of no wonder that while I had some success prior to Queer as Folk, but that happened at 35 years old, kind of says something to that. And I think now, it's been like another kind of strange transition period. And I know, just talking with my manager about things, that she hears that a lot. That some people, there's some people out there who still think I'm in my 30s, and she's having a hard time getting me seen for characters in their 40s, even though I just turned 48, and
because you look great for your age, and I'm 46, so we are about the same age.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you look great for your age, but you don't look like you're 20.
What people think, right, and it's what people think of as like a 48. You're like, I haven't really gotten into the dad realm yet, because I don't see. I guess I don't.
I go through that all
like
the time. I see people and I think, oh, that person's way older than me, and then they're like 39. I'm like, wait a minute, why do I? But I also think that what somebody sometimes in a different part of the country who's lived a different life, and those of us here in La La Land live in La Vida Loca, and I'm putting that in finger quotes. I think we age differently. And I think we know from the time that we come out of the womb that we need to start moisturizing, and we're so worried our faces are going to age that we actually, for the most part, age better.
Right.
We're weary of the sun. All of those things that we've been taking care of ourselves the whole time.
Yeah, and it's strange. I mean, I'm not, I'm not comfortable with artifice in my life, I guess, as much as possible. But I went through the debate even earlier this year about, well, if I'm in this strange place where some casting directors are thinking I'm in my 30s and they don't want to see me for things in my 40s, then maybe because I've let my hair do whatever my hair is doing and it's gone a little salt and pepper, well, maybe I need to start getting rid of that and go for those younger roles.
I think you could totally do that.
But it feels weird to me to do that.
Right. And I get why.
And in some way, and I like how it looks in my everyday life. I like how it looks. And
you want to look like Reagan at 97 with that blue-black hair.
Exactly, the jet black.
Exactly.
Oh, my.
The G.I. Joe hair.
Yeah. So, so that remains like one of those quandaries. But, in my mind, too, it's like, well, but this is kind of also makes me distinguish, in a way. Like, it's like, it's kind of different than everybody.
Yeah.
But, I do look, I go through these things, and I hate having to spend, like, a second's time thinking, but, like, I watch television, it's like, you don't see guys who have any kind of gray in their hair on TV until they are supposed to be like in their 60s.
So
it
they're
seems
super
like.
wrinkled and
exactly.
leathery looking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it just is a strange thing to have to consider with
your
life.
And I feel the same way. I my gray has grown out a little bit now because I had a surgery and it's trying to fall out, so I can't dye it. But I mostly like cover my gray with highlights. And I remember saying to somebody once in a car full of actresses, if I didn't work in this business, I would just let the gray come out because I like it.
Yeah.
But you really can't work in this business and have that much gray that I have for the last year. But hopefully not for much longer because you really can't. But if it wasn't for that, if I owned like a pottery place, or I lived in the canyon and owned a place where people bought garden ceramics from me, I would probably just let it grow out because I think it's cool. To me, it's a testament of living and surviving.
Absolutely.
I'm here and I've been here and I'm still here and I'm alive.
Exactly. You earned every single one of those.
Every gray hair you have.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's cool.
Yeah.
But in this business, it's
So it's still like the vote is still out, the jury's still out onto what's going to happen.
Maybe you can get Just for Men and just do it like temporarily.
Oh, I do actually. I have this Bumble and Bumble spray that I've used for occasional things, like just for auditions and things. It's kind of a temporary thing, but it feels so weird to me.
We're going to take a quick break, then we're back with more of the wonderful Scott Lowell after this. It's the Sheena Metal Experience, LA Talk Radio. Quick break, and we're right back with you with much more radio fun. It's the Sheena Metal Experience right here on LA Talk Radio. For more info on the show, latalkradio.com, SheenaMetalExperience.com. Don't forget to email me and let me know what you think of the show. The wonderful Scott Lowell joins me all this show, and we're talking about many things, including, of course, the upcoming Rise and Shine convention for the Queer as Folk cast in June.
Very excited.
You were talking a little bit about right before we went to the break, and I wanted to keep talking to you about that, but we obviously had to take the break.
Yes.
About how different things as an actor, and how before Queer as Folk, your agents weren't quite sure what to do with you because you were sort of like a young character actor.
Right.
How much has Queer as Folk helped? I mean, is that something that you always have that behind your name, and it's got Showtime, and that's great, so people know you from something, and then they think of you more as a series regular than...
Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, it definitely, it's definitely been more of a help than in any way a hindrance, I think. There was perhaps, just after the series, a bit of that, there was a combination of either casting people or producers who had heard of the show but hadn't watched it, or who had watched an episode and got freaked out and turned it off, and so they had their opinion, and so they think they know you but they don't really know you. Or you had the people who would watch the show regularly and then think that's all you can do.
Right.
So there was a bit of we don't know if he can do this based on the fact that he just did this other thing. And for me, the other weird thing was that prior to Queer as Folk, I mean, most of the stuff I had done out here had been all comedic, but and even though I had a lot of funny things to do on Queer as Folk, it was viewed as a drama, and so I, for a few years, could not get in on any comedies, and it was kind of a breakthrough to find anything comedic that I could do. So there was definitely some transition that went on there, but for the most part, I think it helped. It lets people know, like, oh, he can do 5 years of a show. He's done that, and it was a success, and so it kind of gives your representatives that little bit of power to, when they're talking about you to someone, to say, like, he's not a nobody. You can go see plenty of tape on him if you need to.
Right.
So I think it's definitely helped in that way.
It's interesting because I've learned a lot from doing this show the last 4.5 years, because this is the first show I've ever done that was this guest intensive. When I worked for CBS, it was mostly like, boxers or briefs, you make the call, here's the phone number kind of thing, which is fantastic, but just a different kind of show.
Yes.
So I've learned a lot in the last 4.5 years about how publicists and managers and agents promote their clients to me, and the different things they'll put behind their name. And it's interesting, if there is a television show behind someone's name, you can pretty much use that to sell anything.
Yeah.
Do you know, somebody will send me something and say, so-and-so would like to come on and talk about the annual something dog charity.
Right.
And then in the top subject line, it'll say, Andy Griffith shows so-and-so.
Right.
Doesn't matter how long ago the show was,
Right.
that kind
You're
of sticks
associated with
behind
that.
your name forever.
Absolutely.
And there are people who will click on that and not click on something else.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, Andy Griffith Show, or oh, Brady Bunch, oh, Star Trek.
Yeah.
And it helps. And whether we want to admit that about our business or not, it's human beings are attracted to familiarity.
Yeah, it's like a dating site or something. You got to do
Right.
something to help yourself stand above the crowd. And it's interesting. I notice that even, when I read the New York Times and read the art section every morning and read the reviews of plays, they'll always, put an actor's name and then, like, in parentheses, what last show they were in. Excuse me.
You holding up okay?
Ooh.
You're awesome to come here in this, with the fires raging. We're seeing the smoke kind of pass across the window, and soon the whole valley will be covered in it.
I'm gonna make it through.
Okay. Oh, you poor thing. You're an awesome sport. I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
Did you have a butterscotch candy from the lobby? Okay, good. We do provide
another Ricola.
Yeah. It's why the station gets so many great guests. I'd like to say it's the great host, but I really think it's the big
butterscotch?
bucket of butterscotch candy. Yeah. I saw that I went in our break room the other day, and there were 4 giant, like Costco-sized bags of butterscotch candy, and I thought, that is the secret.
That's the secret.
Yes. If you put out candy in shiny little wrappers, they will come.
It's like my grandmother's purse.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
All right, I think I'm back.
Okay.
Wow.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Did you get an extra water?
I did. There's like little grains of dust that are just like
Right. Little bits
on
of the fire
living on the back of my tongue.
seeping through the windows.
Yes. All right. I was saying something brilliant, I'm sure.
We're talking about Queer as Folk and how
Yes.
that will always sort of live as an actor.
Yes.
behind your
I
name.
was saying that in reviews and the New York Times, that they'll, whenever they list the actors who are in the show, they'll always put in parenthesis, what other show you might know them. It's just a
Right.
strange thing to me that you have to, like, everything has to be contextualized in a way.
Right,
that,
but it's what it's become, right? Every
Yeah.
press release has, and this person from this thing, and
Yep.
this person from this thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, even something like the Young Playwrights Festival, where they have so many well-known names,
Mhm.
they will put a credit behind everybody's name, and
Absolutely.
I do it here on my show website. It has who's on the show, and it has a credit next to it, and
Yeah.
and we pick the credit that we think will draw the most people into listening to the show. And for some people, they hate it. Like, some people are like, no, I don't want you to put Star Trek.
Right.
I've done so many things since then, but
Yeah.
you'll notice when you go to the IMDb,
Yeah.
they sort of pick and select what they think are like your
Known
4
for.
hottest things.
Yeah. And I don't know quite where they come up with some of those too. Like, I don't even know what's on mine. I remember going and looking once, and it was like,
I'm gonna
really?
look at
That's
yours.
what does it say?
I'll go look right now. I think they base it on their rating system. You know
Oh,
how they
right.
have that big star number?
Right.
On probably the star number of the projects that you've done.
Right.
And they pick the 4 biggest.
Oh, I see.
Because sometimes they'll pick something, and then I'll go down to see if I should use it as somebody's credit, and it's like, man next to tree.
Right, exactly.
And I'm like, yeah, maybe they don't want man next to tree.
No.
Look at this lovely, handsome headshot,
Oh,
though.
come on.
Okay, let's see. And some people don't even have 4, and they're the people that I feel bad for, because I'm
Oh.
like, they don't even have enough. Okay, they put Queer as Folk 1, not
okay.
surprised. Trapped Ashes,
Oh, my goodness.
number 2.
Wow.
Ping Pong Playa,
Oh,
number
goodness.
3. And Ladies Room LA,
Oh,
number
wow.
4.
That's really sad.
Wow.
That was a short film I did back in
It doesn't even have a poster.
98. Yeah, it was never got released.
But it's probably how many, because I know Ping Pong Play, a lot of people have been in that, had a lot of
Yeah.
a cult following.
Mhm.
Probably has a lot to do with how many people have hit those pages.
Gotcha.
Those are the 4 most popular
Star
pages.
ratings.
They're
Wow.
not what I would do. I, of course,
Yeah.
would put Bones
Sure.
second, maybe American Dad third.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think I would do that for
Oh,
sure.
well.
And maybe that Disney show you just did, or Chicago 8.
Yeah.
One
yeah.
of those I would definitely.
Yeah.
But Ladies Room LA.
Things you'd rather be known for. It was a wonderful film. It was all about. I'm trying to remember the plot of it. It was a short film. My girlfriend, who was originally, when I first was rehearsing, it was a great director of it, Eric Simonson, who's a wonderful theater writer and director from Chicago. That's why I did it. And originally, the woman who was supposed to be my girlfriend was Heather Donahue, I think is her name, who was in the Blair Witch Project, the one with the snot running out her nose.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to go home.
And it was all while Blair Witch was just about to come out, and she ended up
nice.
dropping out of the film. So a good friend from good friend of mine from college I was able to get into the film, named Judy Prescott. And so Judy's character had just been in the bathroom of this schmancy restaurant out here in L.A., which we shot down at Shotzi's, which was Schwarzenegger's place down
Yes.
in...
Yeah,
We
wasn't
shot
it
there-
called like Shotzi's on Melrose or
Yeah,
something?
something like that,
When I
yeah.
worked on the Stern station, they were one of our sponsors. I
Oh,
remember the
really?
commercials all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was...
We're doing a live remote from Shotzi's on Melrose.
It
Or
was down on... What was in Venice? It was on Main or
Shotzi's on something. Shotzi's on Main, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it was on Main. And she had just been in the bathroom and was washing her hands, and this mean woman comes in and tells her that she's left some droplets on the toilet seat and makes her go back in and clean them up. And has this humiliating experience. And I remember I had to, while we were rehearsing it, and they ended up adding it into the film because I just didn't get it. Like, how do girls leave droplets on the seat? I don't understand it. And they're like, oh, because, when you're in a public restroom, you don't sit on the seat. You kind of hover above it. And it's like, oh, I had no idea. So they had to add that into the scene for all the dumb guys like me out there who didn't know how. I mean, I know how guys
Right.
pee on the seat when they go to a public
No,
restroom.
but that's the dichotomy of women, right? Let's talk really quick. Let's take
Sure.
a little break and talk about
Please.
the hypocrisy of women.
Yes.
Women complain all the time about men.
Mhm.
They don't put the seat down.
Right.
They pee on the seat.
Right.
Can't they just get it in there? Don't they know how to aim?
Yeah.
But then women will go into a restroom when there are only women,
Yep.
and they don't want to sit on the seat because
Yep.
they're scared they're going to get pregnant or get
Right.
an
An
STD.
STD, right.
So they will perch above the seat,
Yep.
and not all women have the dexterity or the aim
exactly.
to perch above the seat because everybody's urethra goes at a different angle.
Right.
Then they will pee all over the seat
Yeah.
and then leave it for you.
Yes. Well,
And that's better than men.
that's what this brave film, Ladies Room LA,
awesome.
was trying
It's
to.
awesome.
I hope you can all find it and put an end to this. It really
Please,
should
to
be
the
like
hypocrisy.
They should have sold it as a PSA rather than
Fantastic.
a short film.
I feel terrible. Guys get a bad rap.
Yes, we do.
Women are filthy. The women's
very good.
restroom is filthy.
Yeah.
It doesn't smell like the urine cake, and that's nice.
They have more fun machines in there too
But
than
it's
they
fil-
have in the guys' room.
but they never
You
work.
have those candy dispensing machines or whatever
Right.
they are.
Somebody's always broken it.
Oh.
No one ever gets a decent tampon out of one of those
it's
machines.
terrible.
And they punch them and scream at them. And,
Oh, women
yeah.
are very angry.
And what about the restroom attendant? She makes me nervous.
Oh yeah.
She kind of sits there and she's got like a little.
Yeah. What a job.
She's got some Love's Baby Soft
Oh,
and
and it's a little bit of like, boy, if you're ever feeling like, oh, my life sucks, it's like, well, consider the bathroom attendant.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, you kind of tip her out of.
yeah, a friend of mine, when he was in college, spent a semester abroad, I think in Heidelberg or something like that, and I think he, on a weekend, took a train up to Czechoslovakia or some place, but it was a really remote little village he went to, and he had eaten some food there and then went back to the train station to leave, and the food was not agreeing with him, and he needed to go use the restroom, and he walked into the restroom, and it was literally just a large open room with about 3 or 4 holes in the ground, not separated by anything, just an open room with holes in the ground, and a woman who he described as just like this kind of bovine woman, just this dead cow kind of look in her eyes, sitting in a chair with towels, just sitting in this room, and and he was at a state where he could not do what he needed to do,
Sure.
and just like
We've all been there.
yeah, and just and it haunts him to this day. This woman, like that, this is her life, sitting there in this room, handing out, and just like, yeah.
What about people who had to perch over the holes?
Oh, well, that's hard enough, but I mean, please, her.
Right, and her. That's her. Yeah, I
that's her
remember
life.
once that when I was a kid, we were for some reason driving to Florida to see my paternal grandparents were down there, and we were driving. My mom got this great idea to drive through the Appalachians and show me where her people came from.
Uh-huh.
And we were in some scary place. Of course, her people came from Louisville. We could have gone through Louisville and then,
Yeah.
seriously made a left and gone to the East Coast.
Right.
And we were in some place like in Tennessee or West Virginia or somewhere, and we walked into the bathroom, and it was just like 20 toilets, but there were no stalls.
Oh, wow.
And my mom, who I inherited my sort of cat-like bathroom
Uh-huh.
habits from, she was like, yeah, we're going.
Yeah.
Because we found someplace else to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because but women were just like perched on them all throughout this. It was kind of horrifying.
I never understood. I mean, I don't know how we've gotten into talking about toilets, but I think
Well,
it's
you know,
one. Toilets around
it's always
the world.
something with us, right?
Toilets around the world on the Sheena Metal Experience.
Right.
But yeah, when I've gone into like some elementary schools, if I've teach that they have no doors on, like I don't get that. What is? I
Yeah.
mean, I know you want to make sure nobody's doing drugs into things, but Man, oh man, a little privacy,
A
please.
little privacy.
Please.
I'm always so happy when it's its own little room.
Yeah.
A little privacy. Yes, it's a little scary. And I love when they're real zen. Like at my physical therapist, I'm going to physical therapy right now because I was in a car accident. And that's, the best part is the bathroom. It's like got a candle and a fountain and a zen air freshener and a painting and a little dresser. And I'm like, now this is pleasant. This is what people want.
Yeah.
No one's staring at me with a comb
No.
or mouthwash.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
But there is, and there's now, and I will say, there's a wonderful bathrooms, public bathrooms, kind of are a great evener of society.
Yes.
Like we're all, at our same. When I worked out in Williamstown last summer, and they house most of the actors all kind of get housed together, and directors and all these amazing talents from New York come up, and and when you're working on a play, especially, there's generally like one bathroom at some of these theaters, and so I had the honor and the privilege of using a urinal while Bradley Cooper, the world's sexiest man, was in a bathroom stall with me. And it's just like we're just there doing our jobs. And what a lucky man I am to experience that kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's when you could really wish you were gay.
Yeah,
that's just kind of a missed experience, isn't it?
I guess so.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's an eBay store waiting to happen.
I guess so. There's some fan fiction.
You said fan fiction, my friend. You were awesome.
Uh-huh.
So did you know, even back in the days when you guys were all on the Queer as Folk set and making the episodes, that you were going to be the one that sort of kept everybody together? Because you're sort of like the scout leader, right?
I guess so. Yeah, no, I didn't know that. I mean, that's kind of become, like, I think since we've been back, it's started to kind of spread around a bit. I think it was just more in my nature to do it at first, and especially out here, I was lucky enough to have a lovely home that I liked inviting people to, and but no, it's not something I ever would have necessarily predicted, because we're all a pretty gregarious bunch, and I mean, I guess it kind of started. I mean, I'm thinking about it. I mean, early on, I remember we were very kind of activist about the show. We really kind of believed in the show so much, and there were a couple of incidents early on where we worried that Showtime, that the network, was going to screw things up with the show, and we all wanted to write a letter of protest to them about some stuff. We were worried that they were going to get the show rated. I think that's what it was. It's so hard to even remember now. But I think Showtime had never shown anything harder than an R on Showtime in terms of the films they showed. And for some reason, after we had shot the pilot, Jerry Offsay, who was the president of the network and who greenlit Queer as Folk and should be thanked by everybody, we found out that he was going to send Queer as Folk to the ratings board. And I'm sure I've already told this story, but we were convinced that because the ratings board, was kind of notoriously homophobic, that we would get in trouble. And to their credit, they kind of wrote back and said, okay, the show is NC-17 or X, however you want to view it. And here are things you can do to cut it, to get it down to an R rating. But if you make these cuts, it's our feeling that you will ruin the integrity of this project. And so when we found that out, we were just furious, and we thought, he was going to water down the show after we had kind of, risked ourselves, especially, early on. Gail and Randy had done a lot of things, and, it's like, you made them film this stuff, you made them go through this and perform these things, and now you're going to cut it out. And so everyone wanted to write a protest letter, and it just kind of came down to me and Peter and I ended up becoming the secretaries for the cast, as it were, and we had another letter of protest we wrote during the premiere, and that just kind of fell to the two of us for whatever reason. I don't quite know why. And I think so out of that kind of, leadership roles or whatever, or keeping people together kind of fell on both of our shoulders, and that just kind of happened. The end of the story is basically that I think Jerry was very wise, and we realized now what he was doing was that for him to be able to go to his board of directors and say essentially this, look, I know we've never put anything on more than an R rating, But look, here's what the rating board is saying. So I think we shouldn't rate the show. We should just call it, because again, they were still figuring out all this TV,
Right, just
MA,
call it
and all
mature
that kind of
content.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that's what they ended up doing, and I think he needed to do that in order to convince his board. Like, look, we've invested this money in it.
Right.
Even the ratings board says it's a terrific, exciting,
Right.
adventurous
Don't cut
thing.
it. Yeah.
Don't cut it. So in the end, he ended up being very wise, but we were very activist. I think our other letter was about we didn't want to show up in limos to the world premiere. We felt that wasn't very queer as folk. That wasn't very rock and roll. So
that's fantastic.
we wrote to our publicist Jackie, bless her soul, had to put up with us, and we wrote a big letter that we had an idea we wanted to show up in a paddy wagon. Like what? Isn't this crazy?
Because they're awesome.
Like we wanted to show up in a paddy wagon. I have to find the letter. I'm sure I still have the letter somewhere. I'll auction it off at the convention.
That's fantastic.
Because
someone's gonna bring you a paddy wagon as a gift.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. Well, we wanted it to be like, because we felt that with the groundbreaking nature of the show, that if we came in a paddy wagon, like all the people who used to be thrown into paddy wagons prior to Stonewall, that this would be kind of like a coming out, like all those people who suffered before the gay civil rights movement started, who were humiliated and thrown into these paddy wagons and arrested just for being gay, that wouldn't this be a great kind of symbolic thing for us to show up in this paddy wagon, burst out and say, like, here we are.
Oh, it's fantastic.
That was our intent.
God, it's fantastic.
And
it's amazing though. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah, we felt like it was perfect, and we were very like, yeah, man. Yeah, it was very kind
Stonewall
of
2.
Yeah, exactly. We were very pumped about it, and I think what we ended up getting was we couldn't find a paddy wagon. We ended up getting this like 1960 something VW bus that had like folding chairs in it, and I remember Hal was stuck in the back. He wanted to be in the back because he kind of wanted to pop out or something like that. And we kind of had gone through all this stuff. And again, I actually have this because I had made a home movie during the whole first season, and I have this all on videotape as part of the home movie. Us in the back of this minivan just crammed in there, and we're so pumped and excited, like, yeah. And we got to the premiere, and like we get out, and because of where they brought the car up, like nobody saw us get out of the car. There was no like grand entrance. So like all
sat in the limo.
Exactly, all this stuff we had gone through was kind of for naught, but it was important to us at the time. So again, that's another letter that Peter and I drafted.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
To write to the people. So I think that's where all that kind of stuff started.
Have you ever thought about putting together something with the whole movie that you did?
I've thought about it. I don't know. I made it originally as a gift for the crew, and I don't know if it ended. I don't think it ended up anywhere. They talked to me about it. The Showtime asked me if I would put it like on the first season DVD, and I kind of felt like it was a very personal thing.
Right.
So now I don't know. I feel like I probably have to get. There's some very racy things in there. I'd have to get permissions from a lot of people. I don't know if I would get that permission.
What about a book? I know that none of you have really written a book about it, and I seem to think if someone's going to do it, it's going to be you.
Well, that may be. Yeah, I don't know.
It's such an important period of time.
Yeah.
Like nobody was doing what you were all doing.
Yeah.
And that's just the difference in 10 years.
Yeah.
Talking about the show becoming X. And you think of it being X now and all the stuff Showtime puts on with gigolos and porn stars and masters of sex, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
It was tame compared to that.
Very much so. And it's so, it's always very hard for me to gauge, even, with these fan conventions. It's hard for me to gauge, like, I know, like, our fans are so devoted and so
wonderful,
so rabid about it, and we love them all. I mean, it's really amazing. It's hard for me to really gauge what the size of of that fan base is at this point in time. And I know I told a friend of mine the other day I had this like slightly humbling experience where I'd gotten very excited last Friday that I got to my 5,000th Twitter follower. I was very excited that I reached 5,000, and I was writing some things back and forth with another friend of mine, Jim O'Hare, who's an actor you should talk to.
Has he been here? Yes, okay. I think he mentioned you when he was
here. So you know Jim. So
he's wonderful.
So we're good old friends from Chicago,
right.
And he's on Park and Recreations now. And we had kind of written a thing back and forth because he had just done Craig Ferguson's show. And I remember when Jim kind of first got on Twitter early on and was kind of wondering like what it was all about and all that stuff. And so I thought, well, let me check on what's going on with Jim. And I clicked over to his page, and he has like 52,000 followers.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is
network TV.
It's a very humbling thing. Yet, like, here's a guy who's currently on a network TV show. And so, and here I was like so proud of my 5,000, and I just felt so puny. But it's like I say, it's kind of hard to gauge like what is the level out there still of that interest. And we've kind of had some discussions amongst ourselves, with this whole Veronica Mars thing that happened a little while back, and the crowdsourcing funding they did, and because the number one question we get is, will there ever be a Queer as Folk movie kind of thing, and so there's started to be that discussion because of that, like, wow, do you think we could do something like that with Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of those kind of things? And I don't know if we could raise as much as Veronica Mars did, and I don't even know. I mean, they were only on 3 years, and I didn't know it was that much of a cult hit show.
I didn't either. I mean, I knew that it was, but I didn't know that it was that much.
Yeah, I didn't either. So it's, so when we've talked about it, it's hard to tell. So again, like in terms of writing a book, I know that, there's certainly a core group of people who would really like it, but it's hard. It's just really hard to gauge. I don't know. Like I wish there was like just one side of it he could go and click on out there, and he could get like a counter,
right.
When you're at the train station or something, they click to see how many people have gone through the turnstile, that we could like get an accurate count of like how many people are really still really rabid about Queer as Folk out there. I don't know, it's hard to tell. The ones we have, like I said, are wonderful and devoted and rabid
I always
and so
say
loyal.
that they're my most dedicated fans.
Yeah.
And I work for a Star
We're
Trek
very
alum.
fortunate. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'm around all the Star Trek people from working at ESTLA with Gates.
Right.
And she's magic, and she goes to all the conventions, so
Yeah.
all the convention people are happening,
Yep.
and they're all around the company.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like your fans. Nothing.
Yeah.
I've had people on the show from the L Word, great fans. It's
Yep.
it's nothing like that.
No. It's
they trump
very true.
everything.
It's very true, and it's just a question of like what are those actual numbers. That's been hard to tell, and it's been, again, like wonderful to have these conventions and to kind of see like, like last year that there was that many people who came out for those things, but compared to a sci-fi convention or something like that,
Sure.
it's going to be very different, obviously, in terms of the volume of people, but.
Well, and it's one show. I mean,
Yeah,
you go to
exactly.
Comic-Con and it's like 300 shows.
Exactly.
And comic books and
it's
all
very
graphic
rare.
novels.
Yeah, and I don't know any other. I mean, we're just a relationship-based drama. It's not. There's no special effects. Nothing fantasy-oriented about it in any way, really. It was just relationships, and I can't really think of that many other shows that have that.
It's wonderful.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's fantastic. Okay, every week when I have one of the wonderful Queer as Folk cast members here,
Yes.
we do a question from a fan.
Okay.
And then they get tickets to the Queer as Folk Rise and Shine USA convention in
wonderful.
June. So I have one for you because we all kind of the organizers and I kind of pick one out that we think are beautiful.
Oh, great.
And so here's what we picked this week. And it's kind of interesting. I like because they're always all very different. And sometimes they're good actor questions like this one. Okay. I'm so excited about Scott's appearance tonight. Ted's character arc arguably goes through the most extreme highs and lows. How were you able to portray the changes realistically and powerfully while staying true to the heart of the character? And then it says, I've really enjoyed these Friday sessions. It's becoming the highlight of my week. Best Mel. Isn't that wonderful?
Wonderful.
So awesome. Why can't it be Queer as Folk convention season every week?
Exactly. I agree.
So that's interesting because it's true. I mean, he really went. Ted went a lot of places.
Yes, he did. And I don't think could have been predicted again. When you ask, what did you think at the beginning? Like I never could have guessed any of that stuff. It was in order. I mean, thank you for the question and thank you for all the nice things, Mel. I appreciate that. I mean, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to kind of to get through it all, and he was, a tough guy to live with for for 5 years, and to keep his core going. I've said before, he's someone who, from when I first read the script, even though I didn't match the initial physical description of the character, I just got him and I understood him. I understood his neuroses. I understood, the self-loathing, all that kind of stuff. His stuff I felt like I had battled through and battled with, and had been, if anything, exacerbated by moving out to Los Angeles in terms of my sense of self-worth out here. And so that was kind of his core, and that, and that's something I could tap into all the time. So despite whatever changes he would go through, that core was easy for me to tap into. I mean, unfortunately, it's stuff that I had worked to tap down for a long period of time.
Sure.
And so it was always a little painful to dredge it back up, and was something I struggled with throughout the 5 years to find ways to leave it at the office while we were in the middle of shooting things. And I don't know that I wholly succeeded, and would really have to kind of detox after every season to kind of get back to the healthier version of me. But yeah, I mean, I was again, like as I say, I mean, I feel with acting you have to kind of bring a lot of yourself to bear, which is why my Ted is different than anybody else playing Ted.
Sure.
Someone else would have brought something completely different to him.
You brought him so much intensity, Scott. You're such a very intense actor. And you brought him so much intensity but so much heart. Like, I remember when you guys were all here a month ago with Robert and Michelle and Randy and Peter, and they were talking about how people would send you fan letters saying,
Yes.
"Oh, I just want to send you a crock of soup or give you a hug."
Yes.
I think you made the world believe that he was really this guy that just so desperately needed somebody to put their arms around him.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
though sometimes when
thank
people did, he pushed them away.
Yeah, exactly.
But he still needed it so badly that
Yeah.
you convinced people that he was different than you, not as together as you, not as
Right.
confident as you are.
Well, again, a lot of that was wonderful writing that Dan and Ron did, and our whole writing staff. But yeah, I had a great deal of empathy for the guy, and it was always very hard, and kind of still is. I did some binge watching last year before the Germany convention because I hadn't watched a lot of those episodes for over 10 years, and I just was worried I was going to get asked some kind of arcane, like,
Right.
in episode 212,
Yeah,
you were wearing
yeah.
a blue sweater, and then it
Right.
switched to a red sweater. So I wanted to be prepared for that kind of thing, and it's still hard for me to watch him and watch his journey. I feel it's very emotional. I feel very bad for the guy a lot of the time. So I think, having that empathy for your character, and again, because it's the part of myself that I feel bad for. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's a very strange place to be in. But I feel
And it's an dichotomous place in our business, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
if you're not supermodel beautiful,
Right.
you spend, which I am not, you spend all of your time worried that you're not good enough looking to
Right.
work and that people aren't going to love you because you're not good enough looking.
Right.
But then people I've known, my friends that are that good looking, their whole life they're dismissed. Their whole insides are dismissed
Right.
for people just caring about
What they look like
You're
on the
hot,
outside.
you're hot. That's all they have to say to them, and that's no
Right.
way to live either. It's
No,
like
no,
you
no.
lose either way.
Yeah.
You kind of just have to find a way to make the best of it either way.
I'd still take that.
You
I'm just
know what?
kidding.
I used to always say in my next life that I would like to be beautiful and dumb,
Uh-huh.
but now I don't think so anymore.
No.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
And then as you age, people are like, "Oh, well, you used to be hot, but you got old."
Uh-huh.
But when I aged, I never worked more.
Right.
40 was my golden number.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you just it's good and it's bad no matter what.
Absolutely.
But I think we all go through that. You are amazing, my friend. And
Thank you, Sheena.
Will you come back and see me again? I would love
Of course,
that.
absolutely.
I would love to get you all back like right before.
That would be wonderful.
And we'll do it again.
That would be
We'll
great.
do another big group, and that would be so much fun.
That would be terrific.
And meanwhile, I've been getting everybody on every week, so I'm going to
Yeah,
hit
thank you so
Robert
much.
up and Peter and
Great.
Randy, and
Oh,
that should
great.
take us right up to convention time.
Perfect. Well,
Uh,
I really appreciate it.
You are my favorite, and you've
Thank
been
you.
here the longest with me, and I so appreciate you doing the show so many times.
Of course.
Where can people find you online?
They can find me on Facebook at Scott Lowell page. There's a fan page, and on Twitter, you can find me at Scolo. And my website, scottlowell.com, which has not been updated in over a year because I need to get new software supposedly for it. So I apologize for that, but hopefully that's going to be back up and running again real soon.
It's still fantastic.
Yeah.
And you can also go to SheenaMetalExperience.com or LATalkRadio.com. Send me an email, and I will gladly forward the links over to you. It's the Sheena Metal Experience on LA Talk Radio, and you know what we do here, people. Every Monday through Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific Time, we rip the veil off the human sideshow and expose the creatures I like to call big old Homo sapiens at their most bizarre and always at their most beautiful. And it's true every day on the show. It may be my show. It is the Sheena Metal Experience, after all. Doesn't mean it's not always and forever, undoubtedly and indubitably. And you know what I'm going to say, people. Maybe my show, but it's most definitely your experience. Thanks for listening. Have a great Friday. Have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful weekend. And I'll see you all on Monday right here on LA Talk Radio.